I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. It is a lovely April 1. Andrew, how many April Fool's jokes have you pulled off thus far today?
It's hard to tell. It's sort of like when Lil Wayne gets I Am Music tattooed on his face. I am a joke, so I can't tell what day it is. But when people think about the pranks that they can play on people, other people, or themselves, I'm like, I'm already eating in my bathtub.
You are the true April Fool. There is no taking that away from you. Any amount of prankery, any shenanigans, tricks, no, you are the one and only April Fool.
And April Fool's has kind of been like phased out of our culture a little bit. Because we have new boundaries now, right? Like compared to 20 years ago. We have, obviously we have TikTok videos that go viral, prank guys do nasty stuff all the time, or funny stuff all the time. But I think the casual prank has been kind of like devalued in our culture.
You mean now we leave pranks to the professionals? No more for the casuals.
I saw
the casuals don't even bother doing pranks at this point.
I saw a TikTok prankster pour like a bucket of feces and like animal parts on someone sitting on a subway or on a train somewhere in Europe. And people were like, where is the prank here? Is this just assault? And that's what I mean, right? Like, a lot of pranks are based off of like making someone feel bad. If you can pull off a prank that doesn't make people feel bad, that's amazing. But most of them are about some sort of shame, and that's just considered a no-fly zone at this point, right?
Well, I haven't really thought about the historical arc of pranks that bends towards animal parts and feces.
Yeah.
To paraphrase Martin Luther King, I think back in the day, the average prank that we were aware of involved either a cup of water falling on your head, a whoopee cushion, and fart noises.
Where were you hanging out? Whoopee cushions.
A joy buzzer.
1920s.
A joy buzzer.
Like
well,
a
these
piece
are
of
all
gum
like
that snaps on your finger.
These are all like the Krusty the Clown pranks that I can think of.
Yo.
I don't think there was a lot of daily pranks outside of things you would order from like Mad Magazine.
I frequent the Balloon Saloon down in Tribeca because I have children, and they have all those old-timey devices, point of purchase. So when you're like swiping or tapping your card to purchase those balloons that spell out the number 3 or the name of a lucky child's birthday, you can buy like jelly beans that taste bad, bean boozled, those like weird buzzers you hide in your hand. It is back in the old times when Obi Toppin roamed the court.
When's the last time you were properly bean dazzled?
Bean boozled?
Yeah, bean boozled or bean dazzled or bean wildered.
Well, it's like the Jelly Belly prank. So it's like a new thing. So it's a box that's half normal flavors and half like boogers and farts. And so you can get a red jelly bean, and it would either be like super, super spicy or cherry. 5 years ago.
I could see how that would be bean wildering.
Yeah. Joel and Bean. I don't know. But
this is meniscus flavored.
We played a prank, quote unquote, on our friend who was an adult, and we were like, "Would you like some jelly beans?" And they were like, "For sure." And they caught a stray, and it was hilarious to them, but it was teetering on the border of like, that wasn't nice. thank God it was just vomit flavored jelly.
Well, the as I said, the history of the prank. I feel like you had I guess it was an MTV show where they would do elaborate pranks involving celebrities, and they would get set up, and it'd be all, hidden video cameras, and that was kind of like.
I mean, Ashton Kutcher, like punked.
Yes, punked,
Yeah.
and then that was the MTV sort of version of the old school prank show.
Mm-hmm.
That was all about that, whatever it was called.
Yeah.
It was like all about hidden cameras. It was probably like the 60s or 70s or something. But that was the original sort of televised prank show, whatever the fuck it was called.
Yeah.
And then you had punked, and then now that's become the jurisdiction of like the Instagram or TikTok prankster, where they've gone from the ones you were describing, which is like, let's show up somewhere in a dinosaur suit and walk around a corner and people will run in fear,
Right.
to things that might be set up because they're so dramatic, which is like, hey, I'm going to dump feces on a stranger's head. It's like, well, if you actually did that, you'd go to jail. So you're going to dump feces on your friend's head,
Right.
or someone you're paying to have it dumped on their head. But then it's going to go viral in like a Mr. Beast way, where everyone would say, oh my God, if that happened to me, I would have to kill you. But like, there's a money-making scheme here at work.
Yeah, and it totally depends. Like, I feel like the most famous punked prank that Ashton Kutcher pulled off was Justin Timberlake's like foreclosure. Did you see that one? Where Timberlake rolls up to his mansion and there's a truck taking boxes out of his house and like his furniture out of his house, and they're like, "You're being foreclosed on. You're in debt. We're seizing this property." And he starts like crying on the corner, like Andre Rison when Left Eye Lopez burned down his house. Remember that?
That was a good prank too.
She did that. No, that happened to another NFL player recently. Was it Tyreek Hill? Crazy, but that it depends on like how much we hate the celebrity or how rich the celebrity is. But I feel like, especially after this Nickelodeon documentary like came out this month, this kind of prank, like I got you, like slimed kind of thing, is like, I feel like we're reevaluating what we think is funny.
Have you gotten caught into the algorithm that shows the pranks where typically it'll be like a white dude will go into like a let's say quote unquote rough neighborhood. All right, we're going to Brownsville, we're going to Harlem, or they'll do it in LA, wherever. And they basically like pretend to be a gang member, or they intentionally antagonize guys on the street. And it's like, wow, this guy's putting his life in jeopardy to get this joke, and it's him walking up like, "Hey, homie, you want to bang?" And the guy's acting like confused and then aggressive, and then he like runs off and he gets chased. I never know how many of these are set up and how many aren't, because some of them they'll like blur out a person grabbing a gun and holding it to him, but the entire thing is very like sordid and playing into the stereotype of like rough neighborhoods being full of gangsters who will, fuck you up if you talk to them or insult them. It's the whole thing is pretty gross, and I don't know if it's even real or not, but the comments are really bad. It's just it's an odd genre that didn't exist in the past, because it's like, it's so stereotypical. Mm-hmm. And if it was real, it kind of would be dangerous, despite it being stereotypical. I don't know if you've seen these, but that's definitely a relatively new, like, at least as far as I can think of, like Instagram-based quote-unquote prank.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to someone injecting a stranger in a strange land, right? Like, this is basically the premise of Shogun, except these pranksters don't really bed the hot foreign, the savage, right? With a capital S.
You're saying the graphic designer doesn't get the girl in these pranks.
The scruffy dude with a master's in architecture doesn't necessarily get the person who speaks English as a second language, for sure. But, I think of that one of the most famous, was it
the creative
TikTok?
Director in Y3 Shoes doesn't get to have sex with the girl.
Store manager for the I'm trying to think of the right place.
Opened a Thai restaurant in Brooklyn.
Wow.
Cobble Hill Thai restaurant impresario. Does not, in fact.
Well, would you like to try this pad thai? Apparently it F-bombs.
This larb fucks.
Yeah. But I think of what was that video of the guy walking by the Irish bar in Boston, and during the day, and it's like, yeah, real fucking funny, F-bomb, you know, like every time the Celtics happen, like this video pops up in my feed.
Yeah, the Bostoners correctly identified that guy as being white who was walking by them.
Look at that F-bomb walking by us. Let's go humiliate him.
That video is kind of amazing, though. I love it. And those guys somehow are adorable, despite being repugnant, because they were correct. They sensed danger from some guy walking towards them with a camera who was going to play them out for being drunk, Boston massholes during the middle of the day. And it was also kind of the pandemic era, so they were going to be shamed for being inside of a bar drinking Sam Adams winter lagers when they should have been back at home. And they saw him. They identified the threat coming down the sidewalk and then just started roasting him and like roaring with laughter, calling him F-bombs. Real fucking funny. Great video. Love it.
Like, don't walk into Yankee Stadium wearing a Red Sox jersey unless you want that kind of smoke. And that might be mild smoke, or it might be like getting hit. And people do this for it's either for antagonizing people, to humiliate those people, or to humiliate yourself, right? Like wearing a chicken costume.
Well, that was also a really fascinating example because the bad guys were supposed to be, of course, the massholes drinking their Sam Adams winter lagers during a pandemic, not being 6 feet apart from each other. They're being reckless. They're being drunk. They're being bigoted. They're saying awful things. They're in a gang. They're threatening. And
They're
yet,
reading Jason Tatum statistics off B-Ball Reference.
They're making Boston Celtics documentaries.
They're awarding Six Man of the Year awards.
And yet, the clear antagonist in that situation is the guy running up on them with a camera, intent on humiliating them on the internet.
Without their consent, right? Is like pointing a camera at them when they're chilling in front of their bar and like eliciting some sort of performance. And they're like, we'll give you a performance. We'll do this. I always talk about generous villains. What kings those guys are. They gave us exactly what we wanted.
That is a perfect phrase. I hadn't thought about that specific idea of the generous villain. But yeah, they're like, okay, we're going to go viral. We're going to be the ones with the slurs. We're going to be the drunks. We're the unsafe, beer drinkers of Boston. That's what you want? We got you, because we are generous villains.
Man, Boston really had its day, right? Like, yo,
Marcus Smart, Hustle Player of the Year, back to back.
Listen, Six Man of the Year is going to be Peyton Pritchard or Al Horford. Pick one. But
the illusion of choice.
The Affleck effect was huge, right? I just saw someone designed a new, in 2024, the Town t-shirt in the style of online ceramics. I'm like, yo, we're still doing this, like Manchester by the Sea. Let's go. Make a Manchester by the Sea koozie, But
what about this? Rounders Boston. Let's pitch it. We'll just create it. It's like Rounders, but it's set in Boston. Rounders 2.
How Boston? Are we talking like Matt Damon's from Boston? Is KGB all of a sudden a Boston bookie? What's happening?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of moving parts. I just feel like you just throw a couple, I don't know, Dino Raja jerseys on people and you're good to go.
So it's the same movie, but Eric Montross jerseys, rest in peace, on everybody. Rick Fox.
That's
Shaquille O'Neal.
Basically, Walter McCarty makes a cameo.
I love Walter McCarty.
Oh, it's Tony Delk.
Is that Tommy Heinsohn? No, it's Edward Norton. What's he up to? What's he up to this Rounders movie? He's in trouble again. Well, classic Tommy.
Yeah, it deals with the death of Danny Ainge.
Rest in peace. But yeah, I mean, the heyday of Boston culture was when Affleck was producing all these movies, right? And listen, Affleck ends up getting, like, settling down with someone from New York City. So, like, this is kind of Trump being, like, the spokesperson for the everyman in America, but really being his heart lying somewhere else, which is Midtown Manhattan.
And
So,
he also lives in Los Angeles. His really only connection to Boston now is lore, and then the fact that he is being paid by Dunkin' Donuts to occasionally, like, fumble huge canisters of iced coffee and donut holes on his porch, like once every couple months.
how has Dunkin' Donuts not really embraced the NBA? Why is it always Chick-fil-A? Shouldn't it be like Dunkin' Donuts giving away free breakfast sandwiches if you miss 2 free throws? It's called Dunkin'.
Well, yeah, especially because they even got rid of the donut part. It's just Dunkin'.
Yeah, I mean, people look to them as like one of the great branding experiments of the last century, but true, yeah. Yo, Dunkin' Donuts donuts are fucking good.
But you're right, that is a natural synergy with the NBA.
Yeah,
And
or Tim Duncan.
Or Tim Duncan. But look, if David Stern was still around, that stone would not be unturned. Adam Silver asleep at the switch.
Shaquille O'Neal actually did ads for Radio Shack. So, I don't know. Jason Terry, get on your teriyaki game.
All the teriyaki.
Oh, this is the must-watch teriyaki, the must-have teriyaki top 10 hot list. Like, gotta hit number 7.
If you've been to SeaTac Airport, you know the best teriyaki in the region can be found at Mike's Teriyaki.
And all these teriyaki kings, Boston kings, donut kings, they're all looking at the same thing, right? To get some clicks through humiliation.
I mean, I like this concept of our man Kenji is just humiliating himself by eating teriyaki in a fashion that no human would ever choose to do, but he's doing it for our amusement. He just needs to lean in and instead of making it clear, instead of making it a historical documentation of Seattle teriyaki, he needs to say, I'm doing this for my own humiliation. Or at least he needs to make it clear to us that he is being embarrassed and mortified by the experience.
Have you ever seen, they're out of fashion now, have you ever seen those mukbang videos?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I didn't even know they're out of fashion.
I just don't see them much anymore. Maybe it's my feed. Maybe the mukbang kings and queens aged out of it because they were going to die. But basically it was people eating unnatural amounts of food in one sitting while the camera rolls. So it would be someone setting up like a camera in front of a boiling pot and a large plate and them taking down like 20 packs of ramen.
I remember we spoke about this on a pod maybe last year or so about the concept of audience capture, which is actually very closely tied to public humiliation. And it's that after a certain amount of time, people who are public performers, especially in the situation where they're relying on hits and clicks, ultimately start hewing towards what the audience wants. And if they start doing something differently, the response of the audience serves to, it basically drag them back and even amplify the direction they're going. And the classic example they gave in this article about this, the concept of audience capture, was a mukbang performer who started out as thin and just liked food, and by the end he was this enormously obese guy who was ranting and raving and eating piles of food with it dribbling out of his mouth, and just became a grotesque monster because that's what the audience kind of wanted from him. They didn't want him to be cool or respectable. They wanted him to become a beast, and he followed their lead.
Yeah, and there's a tradition of this in art, like Yoko Ono, right? Famously, like, here I am sitting here, here's a pair of scissors, you're allowed to cut clothes off of me. And progressively, it kind of like, is awkward, and then it really accelerates, and we're trying to figure out who is the subject, who is being humiliated, who is the ethical person here, who is dunking the basketball or taking a three. And if you were a lonely person and you didn't have the endorphin rush of a zillion people talking about what you're doing, you may become addicted to like gathering, capturing an audience. If you were in a failing industry like the teriyaki industry or the magazine world, and you were getting you were capturing an audience by publishing stories like, I put $50,000 in a box and gave it to a stranger, and everyone's like, you're so stupid. It's like, okay, we need to generate another one of these. Is that a sustainable model?
It seems to be. But also, right, so New York Magazine has had a number of articles go viral recently where the main premise is that the author of the story itself is laying bare their weaknesses or their foolishness. And the one you mentioned is a great example. And it was the writer who also, ironically, was a financial advisor, and that's what their role as a writer typically was.
Even I can be bean boozled.
Right.
Is that a fart jelly bean? Yeah, New York Magazine.
So, yeah, she was being wildered by scammers who ultimately claimed to be FBI agents who needed her to put $50,000 in a box, and she was walking down the street ready to comply, and then sort of snapped to her senses and was like, "What the fuck? I got to write about this." Mm-hmm. And there was a recent article about a woman who said, in praise of an age gap, and I married older, and I'm here to tell you how great it was. And in both situations, it turned out that the story reflected more on the author than the concept itself. And with the financial writer, it was that you claimed to be a financial writer when you were doing this dumb shit. Well, that would never happen to me, actually. Yeah. And the other one was that, well, you just married a rich guy in your early 20s, and that's not really a lesson for anybody because you're a baby. And you're like a super young adult who got married to a guy who could, spin you around the world and give you lavish things because he worked in finance or whatever. So it became indictments of their intelligence or their character versus these universal lessons that were supposed to be imparted. But of course, everyone's in on this. The author knows, the publication knows, the public knows. There is never anything except a pretense that we're supposed to learn from these situations.
Yeah, and a lot of this leans on, these are very common things, right? Like, I married someone who wasn't in my bubble. And it always comes back to, at first, it comes back to this 90s tradition of revealing something personal. And even farther than that, I'm talking about like emo music, indie rock, all these things that we had, like the movie movement with Richard Linklater, Cameron Crowe, all these like personalizations of shared experiences. Like the Knicks lost, one person might say, that is unfortunate. And another person might say, it's like, it reminds me of my mom, and it becomes where people can like express their art form or writing skills. And sometimes I'm like, these are really simple things to bait us into reading what a writer's got, because these simple scenarios are understandable, but it drags you in, right? Like, and then it becomes one of my pet peeves, growing pet peeves currently, is like ball is life. Like we wrote a book about basketball, and some of it was very emotional and a lot of it wasn't, but I kind of balk at people who are like, basketball is a metaphor for something bigger. I'm like, prove it. And like, these articles are all about like, prove it, right?
It's funny because years ago, I think I sort of at least liked the idea that, how someone plays basketball reveals their character. And this is a concept that I did not come up with at all. And I remember writing a story about the rapper Common and going out to Chicago and playing basketball with him. And I was able to kind of draw that comparison. Like, his career reminds me of the way he plays ball. He's a grinder. He looks for good shots. He works hard. he's dedicated to craft, whatever. Like I'm not saying this is a brilliant hypothesis. I'm saying it was an easy one because we play basketball, and then he played a certain way, and it was easy to pigeonhole that into or shoehorn that into his career. And if he had played a different way, you could have done the same thing, but it was one way of doing it. And now I don't really think that's particularly true at all. I think you play basketball in the way that you play basketball. I think it does reveal things about your character in the same way that anything reveals parts of your character. Like the way you are in a bar reveals your character because it's part of your character. Basketball doesn't reveal character, it's just part of it.
It's like running out of talent, right? Corey Brewer has said the most profound thing in the basketball context I've ever heard is, Coach, I did my thing, but then I got to the rim and just ran out of talent. I'm like, right. And you could write about how the rim is a metaphor for the achievements and expectations in life, and the defender you leave behind is the baggage, the crab dragging you back into the basket, your trauma, all this stuff. And I'm old now. I'm like, I don't know about that. Skateboarders do it the most, and I don't mean to enrage skateboard Twitter. Do not want that smoke at all. But I've heard people on there being like, skateboarders by and large are better people because they overcome hardships in different ways. They keep on repeating and trying to achieve this small kind of individual goal for their own self. And that pursuit of like kind of turning the corner of your limitations is the profound nature of this thing. And I'm like, yo, I know some scoundrels who are great at skateboarding. And I also know some amazing people who are great at skateboarding. I don't believe anybody. I just think everyone's kind of in the middle of everything. So like the New York Magazine strategy of like taking, like I started FTX. Here's my story. Being like, ooh, how many people did you cheat out of millions of dollars? It's like, I remember my mom, and I'm like, here we go. Indie rock all over again. This is Weezer. Did you hear about that Weezer shit, by the way?
I have not, but I was going to say there's also been discussion that it's sort of gender-based, where, well, it's women authors who are being subjected to, this treatment, or this is the avenue that young women writers are employing to get forward, and they're not aware that this will have damaging effects on their career later on. That it is seen as a way to lily pad upwards, but it comes at a cost. I also think this sort of stuff has been going on for a while. It's just that this is how blogs were. We're 20 some years into the blog era, and I think positioning this as a modern phenomenon is just not necessarily accurate. The whole point of the blog, or like the personal journal, live journal, whatever, was people oversharing, and that was what separated it from reporting. And I think there were a lot of really good millennial writers, men, women, it was not gender-based, who made how they felt about something the cornerstone, no pun intended, of how they wrote for these national publications. And I think there was a bit of a changing of the guard in that. So when we see these kind of articles going viral for New York Magazine, to me, it just seems like the total natural progression of what's been happening for 20 years, which was people who are more accustomed to writing about themselves in a first-person sense, in a more emotionally vulnerable sense than traditional journalism, have been the ones writing profiles, and whether it's for the New York Times Magazine or GQ or wherever, and exposing their feelings and their personal histories and mining those details to make the story better for a long time.
Yeah, and that totally is an acceptable thing, and based off the skill of the writer. I mean, this even predates the internet. This is the whole zine thing, like Lisa Carver, Aaron Comet Bus. Like, there's and even before that. But this was my kind of introduction to it, like beyond indie rock and emo. And then you get someone like Bill Simmons, who introduces this idea into sports, being like, I'm the sports guy. I have biases. Like, he introduces himself as an imperfect narrator of this thing that has always been kind of a polished viewing thing. And the allure of his work was the fallibility he had as a viewer. Being like, well, I just really love the Celtics because here's my father. Can I introduce you to the man who shaped me? And we walked to games together. And when the Celtics lost, my relationship with my father changed, you know? And like, that was a very valuable, bankable, interesting thing that happened like in the 90s and the early aughts. So it still exists, but like, unless you have, do you have, I want to go into a different zone. Do you have like, got anything spicy?
Oh, I was just going to agree with that in terms of Bill Simmons doing that for basketball writing.
Yeah.
Like, that's absolutely true. And yeah, I'm not talking about something that was revolutionary. I'm more saying the mainstreaming of, all right, I'm doing a profile for the New York Times Magazine about this wellness person, and half the profile is about my relationship to wellness and me and my family and my husband and what this person made me feel. And then I meet them and what's this juxtaposition between her public persona and how I have embraced her and what it's like to talk to her in person. And I think you come up with just as much, compelling narratives as you do in another format. It just really depends on what the writer's good at and if they can successfully write the story in that way. I don't think you need to write it that way. It doesn't make it bad. I think it ultimately just comes down to like, are you good at writing or not?
Right. Like when people accuse TikTokers of being like, they're trying to be the main character. I'm like, well, are they? Are they one of the main characters we care about? Because a lot of these people are fucking hilarious. And my take on this stuff sometimes is like this kind of art has been constant for long enough. Let's say I'm started in the 80s. This like confessional, personal spin on reporting, writing, documenting, creating art. And it's not necessarily popular, but it's been around so long that how many decades will it take for us to acknowledge it as like country music or the hard-hitting investigative reporter, which is like a deeply American idea. It's just like, oh, Americans like country music and they like the main character syndrome kind of reporting. It's like, okay, so this financial criminal went down. I could read the New York Times play-by-play or whatever play-by-play, and then I can read the person's individual personal journey with this story. And to your point, it all depends on if you can convince us or not of one or the other.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Kanye documentary that came out on Netflix, I guess, and how the man who had recorded all this footage inserted himself into the documentary, but didn't have like, I don't want to say the guts, the gumption, whatever, to make himself a main character. He knew it was still Kanye. He knew Kanye was the main character, and yet he wanted it to sort of be about their relationship, and he wanted to be in it, and he wanted to narrate it and it be his project, but he just didn't like have the cojones to say, fuck it, this is about me. Kanye is the secondary character in this Kanye documentary about me, his friend from Chicago, who has been mistreated by Kanye, but has always been there loyally. He couldn't make himself compelling enough. So when you watch that documentary, you wondered, why is this guy in it? Why is this guy keep saying, but what Kanye really wanted to be was a rapper? Like, I know, dude. I know. You said it 20 times. I know he wanted to be a rapper. That's what this documentary is about. He couldn't take himself out of it, but he also couldn't make himself the focal point.
I miss the old Kanye.
Like, it could have been hilarious if it had really just been about him.
Yeah.
Like, here's his, like, Kanye's schmuck friend who followed around for decades and now lives at home in Chicago with his mom and is like, hey, I'm making a documentary about Kanye.
Yo,
and this is going to be my ticket to like stardom. I'm going to be the star of this doc.
I'm still lobbying for the 9-part Star Wars remake of every episode, but just through Chewie's point of view. I'd watch that in a second. But it's
Star Wars Boston.
Yeah, exactly. They're just all wearing Antoine Walker jerseys, but same thing. Luke, you are
Calling
my son.
F-bombs as you walk by McRiley's.
I am your father, and you are my Tommy Hines son. But I'm glad you brought up Kanye because he's done this so good, right? Like when he builds a replica of the house he grew up in, but adds to it and adds like a Balenciaga kind of like doom aspect to it, and has Marilyn Manson standing on the porch. It's like that's kind of thrilling, right? Because however odd and far away Kanye seems now, like he was an amazing artist, possibly of our entire generation. But like that was the last great spectacle that he pulled, I think. And it worked because it was not only personal, confessional, but he made it something new. Like it informed a new visual, it informed a new kind of sound. And like, I think someone like Taylor Swift is really good at that too. She brings you in to her music where she can be playing to a packed stadium and you're like, I am the only one standing here. I'm like, no one can do this. It's like she can't dance. I'm like, who cares about dancing? She has pulled something off that Beyonce can't even pull off, which is like, I am not only in your head, I'm in your heart.
And Kanye is the ultimate example of someone who is always the main character. Okay, it's a Pusha album with Kanye beats. Or even now, it's the sort of the reason he's persona non grata in so many places is that when the music can't get him there and his celebrity can't get him there, he's got to come up with some way, whether it's trolling or being outrageous or being offensive or whatever it is. I'm ripping out my teeth. I'm putting it all fronts. I'm going to parade around with my buxom wife who's going to wear no clothes.
Super
like,
strange.
I'm just going to do whatever because I have to be the main character. I have to be. I can't just go about life as a NPC. I can't be a normie. I'm Kanye West. And we've seen the lengths he will go to be the main character. And of course, this goes back into public humiliation. He doesn't necessarily think he's doing it, but that's a lot of what it is. Hello?
I thought you saw that. I said, go on. I had to let my cat out.
Dude, this is the kind of real stuff that Cookie's audiences love. A brief moment of silence as you let in the cat and I stare at the microphone, not sure what's happening. We're just going to keep rolling because you know what we did? We publicly humiliated ourselves on this pod because of audience capture. And soon there's going to be a baby crying. There's going to be a dog barking, cats meowing. We do it for you, and we'll never change.
Have there been celebrities recently that have continued this tradition of self-humiliation? Like, maybe let me ask you this question through the lens of the new Beyonce record. Is she not personable enough? Like, is she not giving us anything flawed? Like, what is the barrier? I don't think we have to debate what Beyonce is at this point. Huge, megastar, immensely talented, generational, but can't really reach as many people as I think someone like her could have in generations before, like pre-Madonna. No pun intended.
I saw someone was just on Twitter finding pre-Madonna. They'd searched for that. Mm-hmm. And it was generally all like older F-bombs, with a fish in their avatar, wraparound sunglasses, calling athletes pre-Madonnas. So it's funny you used that phrase.
It is a sports podcast.
Yeah. So pre-Madonna. Yeah, it's hard to say because the duration with which Beyonce has been so popular and in some ways out of the public eye in a way that celebrities really weren't in the past. Every now and then she'll go to like a fashion show. She was at the Raoul show in Bushwick, during the last New York Fashion Week. every now and then, she'll be at a game or something, sitting front row, watching LeBron play with Jay-Z and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But for someone of her stardom, and we're talking at this point, 20 years, she is a little bit impenetrable. She's a little unknowable.
She's a master of this craft, man.
Everything she gives us is very calculated,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean contrived in the bad way. I mean that it is
Cold.
it's planned out, it's marketed, it's shiny,
Mm-hmm.
it's cold, and even when she gives us part of her, it's always also part of this plan.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
she's a very fascinating star in that way, and I don't really want to compare her to Taylor Swift just because I couldn't really tell you why Taylor Swift is so successful.
What?
Other than that, Taylor Swift comes off as like just a total normie.
I
in a way that-
totally disagree, but I hear
Really?
you. I hear you. Yeah.
I see her. I'm just like I'm not gleaning anything from Taylor Swift other than she just seems kind of like a normal girl who's excited to be dating a football player, at least during the Super Bowl, that kind of thing.
I mean, I think Taylor
Clearly
Swift
I'm wrong. I'm just saying.
right. I don't want to turn this into a Taylor Swift conversation, but she is far from normal. I think she makes herself available, and she's like, oh, "Did I win the award? Oh my god, I can't believe it! Come on stage with me, Lana Del Rey." And like, she has affectations that I think she is trying to be more approachable, but she is far from normal. I think physically, performatively, and publicly.
I hear you. I just mean I've maybe it's part image, whatever it is, and maybe that's what people respond to. But yeah, Beyonce is just shiny and magical, and only feels like she exists in many ways in the formats that she puts out every couple years when it's time to put out an album.
And it's amazing. The team and the boardroom, quote unquote, it takes to create something that precise is like, that's a skill there. There's someone on her team that is excellent at this, who's mining fine art for sure. It was the Pipolotti Reese smashing of the car window that was super on point at that time in American culture. And this cowboy thing, it just deeply reminds me of like Matthew Barney a little bit, because there's something sinister beneath it. It's cool. It's not totally successful to me because I don't think her iciness is icy enough. And she kind of teeters between, it's your old friend Beyonce from the block, or
Right.
I am your god. And I think she has trouble with both of those things.
And look, she has been a star since she was a kid, and we don't know another version of her prior to that, or really
Stars
since.
have imploded, right? Like Ariana Grande is like a fascinating person. She's been a star since the she was in that Nickelodeon documentary. It's hard to do what Beyonce does. Like Rihanna couldn't really pull this off either.
No, I agree with you. I'm saying it's unique in that way, and maybe it's a testament to how cultivated and careful she is in certain ways. This is not really even reflecting on the art. I agree. Like Rihanna is not the same way. Like we know more about Rihanna. It feels like,
And she's a master too. We love her, right? Mm-hmm. And
it
the
also
stories,
seems like Rihanna is like genuinely cool.
all reports point to that.
The
right?
genuineness is only reflective of what they're giving us.
To be totally fair, and a look at me, Louis, I've hung out with Beyonce, and she's very, very nice and chill. And those stories don't get out as much because everyone's got an amazing Rihanna story. I'm like, yo, Beyonce is a very nice person.
I
Anyway.
bet she is. And I've talked to her on the phone, writing an article one time for about 10 minutes. She was lovely and had a pronounced Houston accent. So when she says I'm doing a country album, I don't think it's strange at all. I was like, she's from Texas. She has a Southern accent. I did not find her, embracing of country music a jarring or questionable decision at all. And I know it's been shrouded in, ideas of like who actually owns this music. Is this a black art form? Is this a white art form? Is it appropriation or reverse appropriation? What is this? I don't know. I don't follow country western as a genre enough to have any concrete opinions on that. I just know that she's a country girl.
Yeah.
Like,
And
she's country, and she's always said she's country, and she's never tried to come across as anything but that. She's not an island girl like Rihanna. She's not a New York girl like Ice Spice. She's a country girl. So making country music seemed, in Walt's words, serendipitous.
For sure. And to kind of reel it back to the New York Magazine topic, it's like at a certain point, you've gotten our attention. You've achieved it. And I think every person in that situation has to turn to either making it personal, but in two ways, being funny or weird, right? And when you look at a subject, if you're writing about a subject and you're a reporter, you're like, I cannot project funny or weird onto them because that's not true reporting. So I have to create that. And that might come in the form of confessing a personal idea or a sleight of hand that is unpredictable, in order to like evolve as the thing that you are. And I love the moves that Beyonce makes, but it's not as convincing as I think the fans that I hear supporting her want it to be.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you on that, because even the rollout for this album, the timing of an album cover with an American flag, considering the cruelties that the United States is involved in, still doesn't really feel that subversive. It's like, yeah, there are people who are pretty upset by the way that our country is behaving, and here you are with an American flag on a horse. Like, all right, like, where's the edge on that? And you're like, there might not be one. Maybe there is, but then I'm not catching. But it doesn't feel like there's an overt edge to that. It feels like it's you on a horse with an American flag. And she is also not someone who represents subversiveness. If it was your man Immortal Technique, for example, on a horse with an American flag, you'd be like, all right, there's a message here. I just got to figure out what it is. Beyonce, I don't know. Maybe not. And then also, the broadcasting with a projector of album promotion on the side of the Guggenheim doesn't really make a lot of sense in a larger holistic standpoint when it's a country music album with a horse and a flag, and it's like, and it's on the Guggenheim. Well, why?
Yeah, and the Guggenheim ideas are Frank Lloyd Wright, modernism, wealth, money, power, right? Which is all
horse girls, and perhaps horse girls could fit into that. Like, a Kalina Strada horse girl, maybe?
It's a weird misstep, and like one of the more interesting parts of all of this that is kind of coming up more is people I see who claim that we can't enjoy something for what it is. It's like, why do you have to dissect this thing into parts? Historically, contextually within her peers, and also within her career. Why can't we just like enjoy one of the great pop stars of all time giving us a new damn album? Can't we just like watch the game and eat our popcorn and like applaud these gifted individuals?
Well, what's funny about that is you are, of course, listening to the authors of The Joy of Basketball, whose main point is that the game should be appreciated and the player should be celebrated, and that it is this amazing sport that sometimes we get too negative about, of course. But I think our point in this magnificent book, that if you're going to read one thing, that's what it should be, is that the joy of basketball is in the details. It's in the way that it has evolved. It's in the players themselves. It's in the storylines. It's in the fashion. It's in the parts. And that is not necessarily the same argument that people who make towards whatever superstar icon and say, can't you just enjoy them for being a star? They aren't saying, let's delve into the little details, unless, of course, they're wholly positive.
Yeah, you got to respect the thing and you got to listen to the thing. And when there's 82 games by 30 teams, you listen to what they're saying and you respect them by breaking it down. But you don't have to be like, he's a coward. You can, that's fun, whatever. We don't like to do that because, like, that's disrespectful. Respecting it is just like, what do they do? What are these nuances? How do we talk about bridges of songs? How do we talk about transition defense? If we're listening and love the thing, you have to talk about the thing. But to say we just have to enjoy this thing as an overall feeling is sort of like a participation trophy that I'm kind of 50-50 on. I get it. But like, we're kind of moving away from that. I don't think any progress resides in being shamed for people who want to talk about details.
Well, it's funny because we talked about the Future album last show, and I've been listening to it quite a bit, driving around.
Old heads.
And I would say now I like half the songs I like a lot. The other ones are pretty good, but overall good album. Like no doubt about that.
Legend.
But there was a good review on, I want to say, on Pitchfork.
Alphonse.
And
Pierre.
Alphonse and
Yeah.
Pierre, exactly. And he did a good job sort of capturing some of the ideas that we had when we talked about. Is it good, or is it just giving you hints of, the older version of Future that you really loved? Is
it good, or does it make you happy?
Is it mining nostalgia for stuff is great, or is it great? Right. And I think those are questions we have all the time. And I was thinking about the debate of, with Kendrick's, jabs at Drake and J. Cole, whatever. And I've heard that album a few times and, listening to that verse in the car. And I was like, I would not have picked up any of this shit. I would not have listened to this and said, oh my God, he is going at Drizzy. He's going at J. Cole. Yeah. Because they're all sort of in between the lines, wordplay, and you see people almost going conspiracy theory with it. Like, well, the way he said like a 9 with a K, it's referring to Drake's 9th album and the 7th song. You're just like, what? No, maybe I can't care. I just can't care.
Right.
And that's kind of where this whole differentiation is. Where you're like, okay, this is a great artist. Are we going to go in and really discuss them artistically, or you just want to go into the nuances so that you can like laud them higher?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? Are we being critical, or are we being honest and evaluating this, or are we just saying, well, yeah, let's get in the weeds on this, but it's all in service of saying that they're even better than you even knew?
Yeah. So, I mean, someone said it well on Twitter. They posed a question: if a new Beyonce album came out and we know everything we know as a culture, are we allowed to just say it's good? Because does that do a disservice to where we're at? Richard Serra just died, and I just think like what a mountain of an artist. But I don't think he could exist in 2024 because we're dealing with different shit. Like, he's not talking about Kate Gate. He's not talking about the perspective of that bench. Come on now. There's no Jontay Porter reference in his torqued ellipses. But, like, we know too much at this point. And I agree with you. I fall short of people breaking down Kendrick's lyrics, like, verbatim like that as well. Because I don't find joy in it. I don't find happiness in it. If you wanted to talk about Kendrick Perkins' illustrious career, I'm kind of game for that. Like, you say tomato.
I mean, I also think it would be cool if Kendrick was just more explicit.
Don't hide behind artistry, Kendrick.
That's what I'm saying. Are you wordplay? Tell me why you're mad. Tell me why you're mad.
Don't talk about how you put $50,000 in a box and gave it to a stranger. Talk about how you're unhappy and you have a cat. Oh, that's a different viral article.
Wait, is that what we're saying Beyonce won't give us? She won't give us the public humiliation that we crave?
I'm saying she's not willing to wear a chicken costume or take it to Bohemian Grove and show up at the... Well, She is scantily clad, sort of like your boy John Cena.
Yeah, I mean that's why we watch wrestling.
The
The man thongs.
the titulation of the man thongs.
You know what's always been annoying to me when people would say assless chaps.
I hate when people bring up assless chaps, and I can't express how annoyed I am at it.
Well, they're all assless. They're chaps.
All right.
It's like
I don't mean to be this guy, but what's a chap?
The chaps are I mean, look, we're talking horse girl culture. The chaps are the like leather kind of protective garments that go on the front of your pants, and I don't know if it's to avoid dirt getting on them or whatever the reason would be, that they go on the front so they don't have an ass by default. Like that's what chaps are. They are something that goes over the front of your pants. So they aren't. If they had an ass, they would be pants.
Okay,
it's like saying,
I see. Yeah,
it's like
is
saying
it protected?
shorts. It's like saying shorts that don't have like coverings over your lower legs. Like no shit, dude. They're shorts. Unless they're Knicks shorts, in which they go from your waist to your ankles.
Right. That's like right. It's like saying assless pickup truck trunks, or I mean, was there? I'm thinking of Ass Man. Remember Howard Stern's superhero character?
All right, I got one for you. It's like saying a sleeveless vest.
All vests are sleeveless.
That's exactly where I'm at.
But I've never heard that phrase, sleeveless vest.
And I think people just like saying assless.
Assless is a very cool word. Ass
I'm
Man
saying,
also.
Yeah, if people will accept redundancy if they get to say assless. Sad but true. A real commentary on the modern civilization, Andrew.
When Draymond Green kicked Villain Brooks in the balls, that was a real assless move. Show some ass, Draymond.
And it did not involve ass at all. It ended with the taint.
What's a taint? Is it male only? Can only men have a taint?
It's most associated with men. I think technically anyone could have a taint. I think, technically speaking, there's a small bridge of flesh there that anyone could use.
So it taint the ass and it taint the LaMelo balls.
Well, this really went off the rails. I think we were trying to talk about Tenacious D.
Let's save the Tenacious D for another conversation. Whack ass band. It got me in trouble with Tenacious D Nation on Twitter. Woo!
That's an assless group.
All right, let's talk about Tenacious D. They popped up as a trending topic on Twitter. What? You don't want to talk about it?
Oh, you're doing it? You're doing it anyway.
Yeah, it'll be fast. So my theory, I'm obsessed with the 90s, as everyone is. I was like, is it possible that joke band featuring Jack Black doing like hard rock covers and like Flight of the Conchords, but with like an American kind of like real American gusto behind it, if they were the last vestiges of indie rock, which is like the everyman, the King of Queens, that whole culture, it's like, I'm not a rock star, I'm just a guy who is talented. If they were the last vestige of that, did they put not only a coffin in that, but end the popularity of guitars as a medium?
I don't know if they had the popularity for us to attribute that to them.
I'm not talking about populism. I'm talking they were the final straw. We're like, fuck these guys. I mean, they played arenas, I think. I'm not talking they were maybe smaller than Weezer, who's as annoying. When I baited you with the thing, have you heard about the Weezer thing? That famous song they have, Say It Ain't So, which I loved at the time, was about like an abusive father, a drunk father who leaves Rivers Cuomo's life. And we all kind of identified with that, talk about like personal stories within like the framing of an ice cold power rock package, which made them so successful.
He lied about Millie's got a gun.
He lied about the whole thing. his mom was like, your father didn't drink. We were dressing up and posing for a photo, for an image. Your father was a really great guy. He never touched alcohol. He never left us. Annoying. Just really, you don't want to meet your heroes on a truthful reporter playing field.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's, but it's also, it's art.
Okay, here's another debate though. What is personal then? Do you believe Taylor Swift?
Sure. I don't know what, I couldn't even tell you what she is claiming in one direction or the other.
Do you believe?
But I mean, no.
Right.
Well, I think authenticity is something that we buy into, even if we know that it's not completely real. You know, there was a scandalous moment with, Officer Ross, where it was revealed that he was not, in fact, a huge cocaine kingpin, but was working as a hack in the Miami-Dade correctional facility. And we all made fun of it. Then we went back to pretending Rick Ross was, in fact, a coke dealer turned rap star. Or we just erased
did we
his
not
past
care?
and said,
We just
said we don't care, and we're just going to keep it going from here. And
which is the worst fate for him.
But in some ways, he was able to just keep it moving, and no one cared. And Tupac kind of had a similar thing where he was a art kid from Baltimore, but his backstory with his mom being in prison was genuine, and the neighborhood he grew up in, and he went out to the Bay Area and was kind of a conscious, fun rapper. And then a couple of years later, he's a member of the Bloods, and he's covered with tattoos, and he's hanging out with Suge Knight. And we all sort of knew that. It all happened in public. We knew what had gone down, but we also knew that he had self-mythologized. He shot cops. He went to jail, and he kind of became this new character. And at the time, everyone was like, "Oh, it's like he became Bishop from Juice." And I think we're okay with transformation. We're okay with some dishonesty as long as we like the music, as long as we like the character that you've become.
I mean, that's an interesting point with the whole Puffy thing going down, and that we talked about this weeks ago. It was like every time there's a Puffy discussion, there's Tupac army kind of arises, and they're just like, Tupac called it out. There's a quote of him talking about this back in the day. Only Tupac is real. And I'm like, ooh, in 2024, in sort of like Mike Tyson terms, do we really want to talk about Tupac? I remember we were at one of the basketball parties at your old house near the Australian coffee shop. And one of our friends was like, and this was so long ago, I think we were talking about like Lil Peep or that wave of artists like Trippie Redd or something. That'll date it. And they were like, the problem with these rappers today is they're just not good people. They get into trouble. They're not trustworthy. They're not good like Tupac and Biggie. I was like, wait a second. Because Tupac went to jail for something that we hate. And Biggie Smalls rapped about killing people. And I know his mom was like, that's the artwork. He was actually just a performer. He was none of these bad things he says he was. But then the streets were like, that's not quite true. Like, he rapped about real stuff. And as this Puff Daddy story progresses and we find out more, like, let's not pretend Biggie wasn't involved in some of this. Those guys were best friends with a lot of money and a lot of power.
Yeah, and it's funny, the whole Puffy being viewed as kind of this goofy entertainer. And if you've known about Puffy, you've always known that he was a sort of a formidable dude. And he hit Steve Stout with like a bottle of champagne in the head.
He killed somebody and Shine went to jail for it.
No one got killed.
He just got shot. Okay, my bad.
A girl got shot, I believe. Maybe among others. I think it was some bystanders, but a girl got shot for sure.
My bad.
And then Shine went to jail. And yeah, Puffy was involved in enough stuff. I mean, even his initial claim to fame was, before he even worked at Uptown Records, throwing the City College charity basketball game and having musicians go there. And he might have been at Uptown Records at the time. I'm actually not totally sure. Yeah. But, promoting an event, maybe even while he was in college, that people died at. because it got stampeded. I mean, his foray into the entertainment business was involved like people dying in an event that was like criminal, overpacking a gym and then having a stampede where people died, like from the jump.
And it's crazy how people like amazingly successful people like Ice Cube now at this point, and like the difference between being like a child and an adult who's on Twitter like saying a bunch of stuff is like a couple years. So people who talk about Ice Cube or think about Ice Cube don't even remember like his solo career, let alone Friday. They might have heard about Friday, you know? And he's like the big three guy who just offered Caitlin Clark $5 million to play, and he's just an entrepreneur. And I'm like, well, that's a really complicated dude, and I like his artwork so much, but like, it's hard the longer these people exist in our zeitgeist to kind of contextualize every little thing they do. Because when I read that Ice Cube was offering Caitlin Clark a humiliation ritual of competing in the big three, which was like totally disingenuous, cynical, and unfair, I'm like, he was an NWA.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like the guy who wrote the song Black Korea is now. But look, I think that is when I see a segue, I know a segue. So this show is being recorded a few hours before the maybe the biggest women's basketball game ever, at least in terms of the public attention. You have Caitlin Clark and her Iowa team.
So good.
I don't know if you're diminishing it or just going, I couldn't tell where you're going with that.
I'm excited. I'm excited, man. There's beef.
There's beef. And they're going against LSU, who eliminated them in the finals last year to become the champion. It spurred a quote-unquote race war because Caitlin Clark is white and most of the Iowa players are white, and LSU is mostly black. And there were a lot of cultural conversations around, Caitlin Clark and her behavior on the court and how it was compared to the black players. And then you had Angel Reese taunting Caitlin in the closing minutes of their victory. A lot of fascinating stuff, but ultimately you have an amazing basketball game that underpins the whole thing.
Yeah, and there's also a basketball nugget that people love, which is Angel Reese won. She's probably definitely not the better player. So Caitlin Clark is the stats person, and Angel Reese is the chip person. So you have a will to win, the dog, versus the stat pig, or stat hog.
Stat hog.
I was just thinking of the Anthony Davis pig meme that our interns used for a good 2 years.
No, I know, I like it. You got the win pigs against the stat hogs.
You got the scoring bacon over here.
The rebound swine.
Yeah.
Assist oinkers and so forth.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fascinating sort of cultural intersection of all these different vectors. And on one hand, I think Caitlin Clark is incredible, and I want to see her play more. And I don't really want to see her get eliminated because she is the biggest draw, and every game that she plays has the chance for her to be eliminated, which makes the game fascinating. Like, can they beat this woman who's the leading scorer all time? And once she's eliminated, you lose the captivating element of her presence. At the same time, if they beat LSU, a lot of people I generally disagree with are going to be overjoyed.
Wait, who do you disagree with?
I just mean the same aforementioned people who use pre-Madonna are really invested in her beating LSU. People with fish in their social media avatars.
I was gonna say people don't dime on swine, but I don't quite see it that way, but I'm open to that idea because Caitlin Clark has become kind of a universal populist idea, right? Like, she was making so much news in a subculture that wasn't really making news in general, let alone Angel Reese, who's a really good player, but like I don't think quite compares. It's sort of like Larry Bird or Kobe Bryant or LeBron James. I'm like, both great players, but like one is definitely not as good as the other, even if we compare them and discuss them in tandem. Like, we cannot elevate Angel Reese high enough to Caitlin Clark's level.
Here they go. Luka Doncic and Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's fair. I mean, race is always the most interesting thing. It precludes like discussions about religion or statistics or math or whatever. But this one's tough because Angel Reese also is Kim Mulkey's player, who has had her fair share of discussions, and I think the Kim Mulkey army would appreciate, well, how do they want it, right? They want Mulkey to win, but Caitlin Clark is white. And Caitlin Clark has been very chill about this beef. When Angel Reese won and returned the
Totally.
I can't feel my face thing, Caitlin Clark was like, I deserve it. That's amazing. I'll see you next year. Like,
Yeah, charge it to the game.
amazing, right? This is what we want. We've talked about this. Caitlin Clark is like, doesn't have that many fallibilities to me personally, but I can understand how she rubs people the wrong way.
And then also in that, she does rub some of those same people who probably root for her in the wrong way because she is a woman who is also demonstrative and claims and complaints and taunts people. And I was watching, I don't know if it was Celtics somebody, and the announcer saw Jason Tatum, whining about a call. And he was like, who does he think he is? Caitlin Clark. Like clearly he'd planned that little jab. But it's like, that's someone who I couldn't say. The kind of person who would be mad about a player complaining, do they want her to win or lose? Are they going to root for LSU and Kim Mulvaney? It's a pretty fascinating collection of characters and also a great game.
Yeah.
And this is what we want. And, we talked about this a little last pod, that Caitlin Clark's statement about, the women's Final Four getting more attention than the men's, that it certainly looks like it's going to be the case right now. And the way that the women's has shaken out, like, you could not ask for more if you were looking at it from the perspective of popularizing women's collegiate ball.
You would want them in the finals, but you have to get them in the Elite Eight because you don't know. They have to survive. So this is kind of like hedging. You would ideally want to see them in the finals.
Totally. But the thing where I was just going with the rest of that, sorry to cut you off on that, was just that the other teams are also, you got South Carolina, who is, absolute monster squad. I think they're undefeated, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Anyway, they're fantastic. You have Juju Watkins, who is the star freshman on USC, and is going to be the face of women's college basketball going forward. You have Paige Brookers, who was kind of like the Luka.
Yeah.
Paige Buckets, the sort of Luka persona, larger creator on UConn.
Who hurt her knee last year. That's what happened, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, she just had a huge game, dropped like 30 against Syracuse to knock them out last week. But
she was
you
the
have
heir
all the
to
stars,
Sabrina.
you have the
Right,
big
right.
teams.
Right.
Yeah, so you got the stars, you got the big teams, you got the rivalries, and honestly, like, the men's Final Four doesn't have any of that stuff.
You got the Taiwanese tornado. That's about it. He's a big boy. He's gonna eat a lot of scallion pancakes.
And you got TJ Burns, who's also going to have a salon with Dean Kissick. Speaking about art,
Is he?
well, I was thinking of the bar TJ Burns where Dean does that.
His new salon for sure.
Coincidentally, has the exact same name as the North Carolina State star.
Same name, same person.
Same thing.
That's the report, but my relationship with TJ Burns is no. But yeah, the Caitlin Clark stuff is frustrating and awesome because a lot of the discussion around her the ceiling is so low for it, right? Because I'm kind of a NCAA casual a little bit. I do the big board, but especially in the women's bracket, like I just know of the stars. I try, but I don't go beyond what comes through in my feed or what gets aggregated to me personally. But the ceiling is low because I say that because a lot of the interesting discussions kind of echo ideas that we had sussed out before. Like, would she be able to be the sixth man on an NBA team? Like, don't do that. That is disingenuous. I hate it. We'll never know. And it's two different things. Or it's like Juju Watkins is a dog and she would just muscle Caitlin Clark around, and Caitlin Clark is too slight to actually succeed in WNBA. I'm like, we went through Steph Curry's all-time great career saying all of this until it just kind of went away because it never happened. Like, Caitlin Clark is going to be a bona fide number one overall pick.
Yeah, and also what's fun about those conversations is that at some point, I guess, when you're a sport that's ascending, as women's sports are in general, there's just a greater popularity in women's sports in the
Wait, is this
public.
true?
And yeah, it is for sure. Like,
I mean,
sports are
over
definitely getting
over the golden era of women's soccer, like that dream team.
I don't know about those spikes, like with the Olympics or, when you had a tennis star, but I think trend-wise, from what I understand, women's sports are on the incline over the last few years in a way that we haven't really seen across the board. And I don't have an explanation for why. It's just one of those trend things. Like, action combat sports are up, women's sports are up, live events are up, and so people are seeing women's sports as a place for more potential, whether that's good or bad or just more exposure. However, I think it would be nice if women's basketball players were able to earn more money and stay in the United States instead of going to, say, Russia. Like, that would be cool. But just back to the Caitlin Clark game, I think at some point, in the same way that conversations were going to be had in basketball that are going to be redundant, they're going to be discussed in women's basketball. And it's just sort of this like natural gravitational pull towards the same arguments. And with people who may have lost those arguments in the NBA are like, wait a minute, here's a new opportunity for me to ply my wares. I've got an argument about how a shooter will never survive in the WNBA. Welcome back, old friend.
Yeah, and it's a different song in a different place. And this is like how great ideas are. You take something and you put it somewhere else. But it's very close. Like the WNBA and NBA are so intrinsically entwined that I feel like some of it is like the songbird stuff we talk about.
I agree. I just mean, if you were like, Steph is going to fail, he's too small, shooters will never win, you're like, wait a minute, hold on, I got a shooters will never win take somewhere in the closet. Let me dust that thing off for Caitlin Clark.
Yeah. Well, I don't know anything about the women's bracket, but you know what I do know? Shooters will never succeed over the dogs. And I'm like, Steph Curry is a very successful player, but sure, like that'll start a whole Jordan originalist take and eras and toughness and assless chaps.
Yeah, we know where this is going.
Classless chaps. Right.
Anyway, those games are tonight, and I think you've got UConn, USC, and I believe, and then LSU, Iowa. I think those are the games. So, and enjoy. Anyway, we can talk more about the results next week.
Yeah.
Off to the inferior brand of basketball, men's. The tournament's been pretty fun, but I think for me, the lack of pro prospects that I can identify has made me watch it in this very pure form. That's kind of enjoyable, but it's just based on like Duke losing.
Yeah.
I have no other agenda. I just watch it like, I hope Duke loses.
Yeah, they're lacking a guy. I mean, next year Cooper Flagg is going to plant his in our psyche a little bit. But right now, like Filipowski kind of misses most of the game, and just don't care about it. Even Coach K isn't there, so it's not as delicious for me. I don't know. Kentucky was the team that I identified the most prospects on, but they went down a long time ago. So, yeah, I don't know. I just want to see more tomfoolery. I want to see people Jontay Portering this thing. It's just like, oh, my eye hurts. I scored 2 points and I have to come out of the game. I wanted more shenanigans.
Well, the biggest star right now is your boy, Zach Edey, however you say it. He is the star center for the Purdue Boilermakers, who are headed to the Final Four. He dropped a 40-burger in the Elite Eight game. He's also, from my understanding, half Taiwanese. Andrew,
Oh,
do you want to? Would you like to go off?
are you talking about Five Spice? Oh, the Taiwanese.
Night market?
Sure. How about the super dumpling?
Go on.
I'm trying over here.
No, you're doing great.
Yeah. There's
So what do you think about him as a pro prospect? He absolutely dominant performance in his victory yesterday. I mean, 40-15, whatever it was. Went to the line a ton, made his foul shots, had a key block down the stretch that pretty much sealed the game. Like, where are you taking him in the NBA? What do you see his role on the next level as being?
not to repeat ourselves from last week's perfect pod, but
but now he's a superstar.
right.
Now he's that dude.
And Jonathan Gavoni, who I love, Draft Express forever, has him in the lottery now, which is much different than a lot of mocks I've seen prior to this kind of coming out party. He's huge. The boy is big. He can take down some bow, man. Bow. And there's no way he's not going to be not a presence, but I heard the comparison to Boban a little bit, which kind of bummed me out. But he's kind of more skilled. Boban is very skilled. I don't know. He cannot stretch. Has a great touch. He can shoot free throws and around the rim. He's obviously a menace. But his inability to harness the speed of which a team needs to play with pace in 2024 and to stretch space makes him complicated. He reminds me of big boy Jalen Duren, who was a tantalizing player, a really good draft pick, but now the Pistons are stuck with him. And is he going to be as good as Mitchell Robinson? Hopefully.
Well, I think there's a concept here of there are players who are, you could say, plug and play. Any team can use a Paul George.
Wings. OG Anunoby.
He's a wing. You stick him out there, it works.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think someone like a Chet Holmgren would fit into that same category.
I agree.
Shot blocker, but he can also shoot well enough to space the floor, regardless of his abilities to handle the ball and do other stuff. Those two qualities alone, you can put him on any team. You can figure it out. Mm-hmm. A combo guard who is not tiny, can play off ball, can defend a little bit, can shoot, can pass enough to be a credible primary ball handler. Even if they aren't a superstar, there's 20 of those guys in the league. You can figure out how to use them. Mm-hmm. Maybe they start, maybe they're 6-man. You can figure them out. Mm-hmm. And then you start getting into these other categories where it's okay, you can't shoot, but you can handle the ball and you can defend. So we know a way to use you, whether that's Simmons or Draymond or the Thompson twins. We can figure that out. But when you start combining those sort of players with other guys who are limited and not that easy plug and play, then you run into problems. So with someone like Zach Edey or Zach Edey, is it Edey or Edey? Edey. So with Zach Edey, it's okay, he's going to have to play drop, and he'll probably be okay at that because he's enormous and he can defend the rim. Mm-hmm. But we're going to only play that defense. And he's not going to be switchable, and he's not going to be great in transition, and he also doesn't spread the floor. So you start saying, we need really vanilla. And he's not really a great vertical spacer. I mean, he can go and catch a lob, but he's more of a post-up guy than like an explosive athlete. So you start thinking like, well, how exactly would you fit him into a team? It has to be then a team with 4 guys who can all really shoot. It has to be a team that is constructed a certain way. And then you start saying, well, we can't use him with some of these weird, more unique players who are more talented. And it starts limiting the amount of places that you could put him. So I think he can have a successful pro career. I think he could even be a starter. But there is kind of a ceiling when you have that sort of guy who is not a superstar, but has a few weaknesses that also demand that you cater to those issues in the way that you play the game.
And I agree. And however much I love the prediction of him going in the lottery, Taiwanese pride over here, I just think it, to your exact point, kind of hinders or kind of demands that you create a roster around him. That's not really what you want from a top 14 pick. Ideally, they would be so good that it would be worth it. Like maybe Scoot Henderson, the Blazers, the Trailblazers were they were glazing over this tiny guard, but now you have to construct a roster around him to kind of compensate. That's tough at number 3. And number 14, let's say Edey was there at 14 and there was a wing. Not a great, like a Trey Murphy kind of prospect. I would kind of go Trey Murphy there, and maybe that's how players fall, but there's no dumb teams anymore. And to your exact point, like there's Edey lineups, and that's a really tough thing.
Yeah, if you wanted to use him as a backup center on the Knicks, that's a situation that could work. You know, they play a lot of drop. He's a pretty good passer. You could put him at the elbow with like Hartenstein and, you know, throw some backdoor cuts and pass to shooters and set high screens. That could work. But could you swap him out for, say, Paul Reed? Well, not really, because Paul Reed is a much more dynamic defender.
For sure.
Could you swap him out for like Brook Lopez? No, because he can't shoot threes like that.
Yeah.
Can you swap him out for, you know, Sengun? Well, no, because Sengun is a great passer and a great scorer, and you run the offense through him. And so, yeah, you start kind of looking at how teams are built, and you say, what about the Mavs? Does that work? And like, no, not really, because he's not an elite lob catcher, and we want the lane spaced out so that Kyrie and Luka can drive. And I think you would sort of go through the league and say, the Lakers, well, you don't want him next to AD. And there's a lot of places where it sorts limiting the way he could be used. That doesn't mean he can't be a backup, but how do you get him on the court for every team for 25 minutes is much more of a challenge than with some other kind of guys.
Imagine if Ivica Zubac had like spacing capabilities. Totally different Clippers team, right?
Different player, yeah.
And he reminds me of a Zubac. Or like, you know, like an evolved Jamal McGlure. The Knicks were full of these kind of players at one point. And you see the success of maybe less heralded, even like less talented players, because like Edey is talented. He's got buckets. But like Hartenstein does something wonderful, which is like he reads space well and he passes well. And he knows when to attack. Like these instincts are really valuable for like a fraction of the cost of a number 14 pick.
Yeah, again, I think the Knicks are a good example because they play a defense that does not really have the big man leave the paint that much. They generally play drop. They have, you know, they never space the court, like 5 out unless they're going small.
Yeah.
And you could say, yeah, sure, you'll post him up against smaller guys and he can be an efficient scorer in the paint. But then you say the next question, is that what we want our offense to be?
I know.
Like, is that our plan? We're going to bring out Zach and we're going to run our offense through our backup center. Now we're talking about Jahlil Okafor.
Yes, and that's when the Knicks kind of gave up Jalen Duren. I was like, he's going to be good. I just don't want that kind of challenge in terms of construction on the team, because there's already Mitch, and however much I love Mitch, like, you have to kind of pick your battles with him. This kind of player never does well on the KBB, I'll tell you that.
But then if he can just develop a like top of the arc 35% 3-point shot, which I don't know if he's working on it, but if he could learn that, then opens up a whole nother array of options. But listen, right now, would you rather have Reith or him? Who's easier to fit into a modern NBA team? And you're like, probably Reith.
What if I read a book? I'd be a totally different person, man. I wouldn't be eating over the sink. I wouldn't be sleeping in my day clothes. All I have to do is read a book. I'm sorry, I cannot do it.
Dude, any book.
Any book.
It doesn't matter what it is. Just go and read a book. I don't care if it's Dr. Seuss. I don't care if it's the Anarchist Cookbook. Just go read a freaking book.
Oh, is this the Alex Jones memoir?
Read it.
I read a book.
Go get informed.
Yeah. Is Brunson getting enough calls? Is there enough respect on Brunson's damn name?
All right. I got a question for you about this. So, following the Knicks' last 2 losses, Knicks Nation, the Bing Bong Bong Bingers, are apoplectic. Their guy, Brunson, is just not getting the calls that he deserves. And this really came to a crescendo following last night's loss to OKC, where late in the game, he drove to the basket, put up the shot, got hit in the body, careened to the floor, and they did not give him an and one. So he scored the basket, which put them up by 1, and then I believe that would have put them up by 2, and then the game would have been tied on SGA's turnaround jumper. Anyway, the whole discussion after the game was Knicks not being respected, Brunson not getting calls. The refs have a deep vendetta against him for an array of reasons, and Andrew's going to explain what those reasons that the NBA hates the Knicks and hates Brunson are.
Well, the Knicks rank pretty high in free throw attempts. Brunson is number 11 with 420 free throw attempts as of Monday afternoon as we're recording this. That's at a 290 free throw rate. I compared him on Twitter to 4 notable players. Joel Embiid, who is known as a foul merchant, is a 534% free throw rate. Jimmy Butler, Emo King, but makes his living at the line, 585. Dame, 388. Trey, 403. So, like, Brunson is well below that. There is something happening there. That call that you were talking about late in the OKC game, I didn't have as a foul. It looked like incidental contact.
Me neither.
I thought that was a clean play. Whatever.
So just for those who haven't seen it, so he drives in from the left side. He has a little running room. He, sort of dives towards the basket, putting the ball up with his left hand. Mm-hmm. And after he releases the ball, he gets hit by Lou Dort, and then there's another defender converging at the same point. And then he goes flying to the floor. They count the basket, and OKC calls a timeout. Brunson sits there like a baby.
He should try to sell it. He did the right thing.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
No, I have no issue with that. He wasn't out of control. He wasn't weeping. He just kind of sat there being like, "Are you kidding me?" That's become his default demeanor. Like, I can't believe these guys aren't giving me calls. Like, what is going on with this crazy mixed up world?
You got to sell it.
And Knicks fans are loving it. They're loving the antics. But I didn't think it was a foul either.
Yeah, no.
I thought he cleared out with his right arm.
Yeah.
And I don't think that should have been called either, but he initiated contact with his right arm. Yeah. He released the ball, and then they hit into him. I don't want games ending where a guy puts up a shot and then someone hits into his body and we say, actually, that's a shooting foul, and let's decide the game at the line. The shot was off. It was out of his hand before he got hit. I don't want that call being made. And I was rooting for the Knicks in that game, but I don't want games decided like that. He had a good look. He made the shot. You don't get an and one because someone hip checked you after the ball was gone. That's not how you end games.
But sort of like him and other players like Luka complaining about a play. They're not complaining about that play. They're complaining about a play in the future. And I thought the game previous to this, the Wemby coming out game, which is funny because Wemby has had better games than the one versus the Knicks, but not many. It was one of his best games. The game was maybe not decided on tip-off violation, which is kind of
that was a strange call. Yeah,
I love referee mistakes, and you know me, I'm kind of dead inside when it comes to the Knicks. So like, I thought that was funny, but that was a bad call. There was a jump ball on the Spurs end of the court, and it was Mitch and Wemby, and Mitch wins it, but they call a violation because they claim he got it on the way up. First of all, he didn't really get it on the way up. He was just faster to it. And you're going to decide like a crucial possession that way was hilarious. So I think the economy of grievance that Knicks fans had for that Brunson play was an echo of the Spurs game.
As Bol said, they dick riding, bro.
That's amazing. Someone, I think our boy Fraser approves, was like, you guys are shocked at Bol's voice? Like, what do you expect? A bunch of clicks?
Yeah, I think he was retweeting something, but I thought it was funny.
Very funny, because like I was shocked too. It's like, this guy wears Balenciaga. Like he wears.
He's ricked out.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you seen his Grail? Did I ever send that to you?
Oh, you mean his
secret
IG account?
No, it was. I guess it was Grailed, or it was another one of those like retail social media sites where he had these clothes up for sale, and it was like, you know, Palm Angels and Rick Owens and Balenciaga and you know, all those like kind of expensive streetwear brands.
Yeah.
And it was all like triple XL, quadruple XL.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was legit. It was his. It didn't say it was his, but we know people who are like mutual friends with him, and it got passed along.
Oh, for sure. Our buddy Hua, I was talking about Bol, and he informed me of Bol's secret drip account, which is amazing. I'll post it when I find it. I can't really find it because Google doesn't even have it, but he has an account just for his fits every day, and it's pretty awesome. He's dedicated. He loves it. He's into the dirty details of fashion. It's awesome.
So it must be one of these things where he wears them, he posts them, he sells them. He's
just
doing the full retail to social media drip omniboros.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's and when we were talking about Edey, I was thinking about Bol because like I'm kind of with Shaq here. He is everything we talk about Wemby being. It's a well-known secret. He just doesn't really like being in the NBA or playing basketball. But like, he is the talent kind of that's comparable to Wemby, not so much Chet.
Or at least in theory.
Oh yeah, of course, because he's not even close to that. But we compare Wemby to Chet, to Chet's detriment. But Chet is more earthbound. He's pulled gravitationally by the crabs in the basket. Bol kind of floats out in the ether closer to Wemby, I think.
I agree. Can we talk a little bit more about the Brunson foul stuff, though?
Do it.
So my question here, I don't think that you personally buy into these theories that Knicks Nation is propagating about, well, he's small, so he doesn't get the calls. Okay, well, people say the same thing about big guys not getting calls, so that's probably not it. It's probably not a size issue, especially when you see someone like Trae Young, who is smaller than him, or Isaiah
Damian
Thomas
Lillard.
before he got hurt, or Lillard. They're all smaller than him. It's not a size thing. It's clearly not a Knicks bias thing. You know, it's not a Knicks bias thing.
As
No
a
one has
short
problem
king
with
wearing
it.
an RJ Barrett jersey, home, Knicks in blue, I take offense to your tone.
So my thing is that I think that he does not draw that many fouls because the contact he generates is on the way to getting a shot. And he makes it difficult to sometimes officiate that because he still gets the shot off. So he'll make a move, he'll make some contact with the guy, it's to get some space, he'll bounce off of it, he'll put up a shot. And I get that someone would say, but look, there's contact, that's a foul. But he's still getting the shot off and usually unimpeded. guys like Harden or Embiid, Luka, what they do is they create a situation where the ref just kind of has to make a call. They'll generate some contact, and then they'll wave their arms up through the defender, and it's like, what are you going to call? Is it an offensive foul? Is it a defensive foul? Something happened. You can't let this play through because it ended the play. It's chaos. There's physical contact that made the shot impossible. Something has to be done about it. And he doesn't really do that. He goes up and he gets his shot off. And I thought that last shot that people were so furious about is a good example of that. There was contact, but he was able to get a shot off unimpeded. His arm didn't get hit. He wasn't like walloped by a defender before the ball left his hands. And yet there was contact, but some of it was what he created with his off arm. Some of it was just the nature of scoring around the basket. So he gets to the line a good amount, basically the same as LeBron and KD this year. I think we're sort of stuck in this idea, not you, maybe you, that like, well, he's an MVP candidate, therefore he should go to the line as much as other MVP candidates. I'm like, that's just an idea. That's not basketball.
I agree with some of that, but I mostly disagree.
God damn it.
I think the action you're talking about is
April Fool.
Is kind of like, and I subscribe to anecdotes. My life is built on a glass castle, a bouncy castle of anecdotes.
A fragile crystal castle.
Then I'm sitting on the throne, the bouncy throne. But the reason why he finishes and follows through on actions where he's trying to sell fouls is he doesn't hear a whistle. So he's got to finish. He can't just hold the ball and be like, I'll take a travel on that, I guess. You know, like if he doesn't hear the whistle, then he has to continue. If he starts hearing whistles, then he won't. You know, this is just kind of a result thing. If refs are willing to give him quicker contact on actions, he wouldn't shoot the ball. So we're talking about kind of a cause and effect that don't really correlate to me.
Well, I'm mostly thinking about, especially with Lillard and Trey, guys who are comparable as short kings. They do the thing where they drive in, they hit the defender, and they just kind of explode.
Oh,
Like
Brunson does that, though. Brunson certainly.
Somewhat.
Oh, he does it enough, yeah. I mean...
But he doesn't just go flying to the ground and there's no call. I mean, he gets to the foul line a decent amount.
Though. Come on, though, right? Like, he definitely is on the ground constantly complaining with the ball in his hands. Like, he does do that.
But, I mean, he draws a lot of those calls. Like, his free throw rate is pretty good. It's not insane. But I just mean, what's the theory on why he's not getting calls then? My thing is, like, I just don't believe that's the case. I think he shoots a lot of mid-range jumpers. I think he does get a decent amount of calls. And as I'm saying, I think his main thing is he initiates contact in a way that allows him to get space and get a shot off. I know I'm being redundant here. And then someone like Harden would just sweep his arms under, rip them up, the ball goes flying, they both hit the ground, and the ref has to do something. I just think his contact is more part of like him getting to his shot versus Embiid and Harden, who draw contact in order to draw a foul.
I think every assless chopped cheese chap is half right.
Assless chopped cheese.
Like Doc Rivers, they're right twice a game. But when they're like Brunson deserves more fouls, I don't agree with that. But I do.
Okay, that's where I'm at. I don't think anyone deserves more fouls.
But as I put on my chaps, because they're all assless. I'm a whatever's king. Let me describe my fit. Let me bowl for a second. We got Alexei Shved jersey, white, home. Yeah. I got Wallabies. I got no socks. I got just straight up chaps.
Like leather pants.
Chaps.
With fringe.
That's all I have to say, because I don't have to tell you if they're assless or not. They're just chaps.
We already know they're assless.
Yeah. I'm sitting here, assless.
Like, don't insult our intelligence. We know that chaps are assless.
Don't assume I'm wearing pants. Just you can think that I'm going assless over here.
Mesh Knicks chaps.
That's what I'm wearing. Number 8. Oh. for the Charles Sprewell I see. Vintage assless chaps. But these assless chaps who claim Brunson deserves more free throws are kind of right about one thing, which is I think each player, especially superstar players or just star players, have a culture that they have cultivated. And certain fouls are called because refs can identify what a player is trying to do. If you are James Harden, you've established to the refs that you're looking for a way to play the game. I think a genius way to play the game. Or Damian Lillard. He's been gunning for these fouls since day one. And the refs know this, whether that be an identification of what we're seeing or just like a culture behind each player. But if Jimmy Butler starts backing someone down, if you're a ref, you're looking for a foul. If you're OG Anunoby backing someone down, you're not calling that whistle.
There's truth to that too, kind of like the sociology of players, and especially with stars. I think that's true. And even if someone was an extremely good player, but they were a rookie, it would take a little while for refs to understand it. But that said, someone like Austin Reeves last year, he got to the line an insane amount.
But it was understood that he was crafty, right? I said, it was understood that he's crafty, White.
Well, I just mean that I don't think it's necessarily a chicken and the egg. I think you show that you can do something, and then the refs start picking up on it. I don't think the refs are just going to say, hey, this Reeves guy draws a lot of fouls without him doing it enough.
I'm claiming race bias here. I think people tried to claim Reeves right off the jump that he was a cerebral player.
Maybe, but he was just always able to get to the line because he did a lot of those little, like, kind of turnaround fakes that Jimmy Butler also is a maestro at, where you get the ball around the elbow and you make it look like you're going to shoot a fadeaway, and then as the defender lurches towards you, you just kind of like shrug your shoulders and go right up into him. They're both really good at drawing that foul. But I think it's kind of what you're saying is I think that you teach the refs like what your bag of tricks is, and then when people bite on it, then you're going to get the call. So, you know, when Harden would drive in and wrap his arms under a player and then just like rip them through, the refs knew that was how James Harden, you know, bewildered people into drawing fouls. So maybe Brunson doesn't quite have that, but I also do think it gets back to kind of what I was saying, is that he doesn't demand that they blow the whistle in the same way that Reeves or Butler on those little turnaround jumpers do, because it's a newer version of the classic Sam Cassell or Dwayne Wade or Paul Pierce pump fake. The guy gets in the air, you just let him land on you and throw the ball up. You're like, well, that's a call. There's no other way around this.
Yeah, and even in the microcosm of this week, these two tough losses with the Knicks, I think if the Knicks won both these games, this wouldn't be a conversation talking about chicken or the egg. But, you know, in general, it could be argued after the whole, I don't know, the curtain is kind of falling with the NBA and the way they're curtailing scoring and the foul rates in which these calls are being made, and the Jontay Porter thing we found out about. It's like, it's a game within the game within the game. You know, it's like not only do the teams have to play their opposition and the refs and the fans, now they have to play against a script of the NBA and people who own rice pudding shops on Spring Street taking bets on games.
Yes, that's correct.
So, like,
we talked.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you brought up the Jontay Porter. Let's get into that a second.
Yeah.
Just because we spoke about the NBA's unsavory liaison with the gambling element. I think even in our last pod or two. And the writing was on the wall that this was going to have ramifications. It has been too gratuitous, too fast, too greedy. And it was just clear that something was culturally off. And we saw Tyrese Halliburton talking about how
feels like
his
a
social
prop.
media was just like half people criticizing him and yelling at him about, you know, not reaching his prop bets that he doesn't even know about. And it's just this bewildering experience. And then you had, I forget it was Bickerstaff or one of the other coaches was talking about how when he was on the sideline, he's being berated by fans of his own team who are mad that he's taking a star player out when they're up 20 late in the game because they haven't hit their parlays. And he's like, this is bullshit. And I think we sensed this, being you, as being ingenious prognosticators. And they said something is rotten in Denmark. Is that it? Is that the?
I think so.
I think I nailed that one.
This bean been boozled. this Beantown game been boozled.
Something is rotten in Beantown.
And if you notice, like the NBA or let's say ESPN and The Ringer and even the Levitard Network ish don't really talk about it this much. It should be more newsworthy than Kyrie Irving's likes on Instagram. But the whole Rudy Gobert rubbing his fingers together went away. Jontay Porter news went away. I have sympathy for Kate Gate Nation when it's like everything that we're told is to shape our brains to not see what we're actually seeing. And I'm like, of course Adam Silver does not want the Jontay Porter thing to be a topic, sort of like Shohei Ohtani has not been really talked about since. And it benefits them that Jontay is not a real name. He's not quite a rotation player. He was getting some minutes. Probably
playing more minutes than people thought.
Yeah,
he like 20 minutes a game.
Yeah, enough to influence some rice pudding lines, but most famous for being Michael Porter Jr.'s little brother, and the NBA has no benefit of discussing what's in plain sight that we can all see that Halliburton's talking about, but also what do you expect them to do, right? Because if the trust disappears from this thing, like we talked about last week, they're going to not lose us. They're going to lose the middle fans.
Yeah, and, you can look at the way that sports gambling has also firstly infiltrated sports media, even before the NBA really embraced it wholesale and made it part of their marketing experience and part of the game day experience and part of the coverage experience. So, right, there's no one other than the truth tellers over at Old Cookies Hoops who are going to sit here and say,
we're not getting paid by the NBA or DraftKings, right? Like,
if DraftKings comes tomorrow and says,
right.
Andrew and Ben, we'd like to give you zillions of dollars. And I was like, what gambling problem?
Yeah.
What? No. We were talking about a totally different thing. It's a rice pudding shop down in Soho. Yeah. There's no issue with gambling in basketball, because this Jontay Porter story is enormous. It's enormous.
Yeah, I know.
It's not the Black Sox throwing the World Series, but it's like a huge alarm going off. It's the fact that these bets you're making that are incredibly profitable. They did research showing that the parlays are where they make 30% more money. They just make all their money on these parlays, the gambling companies and the NBA. And this is where the money for all these sports networks and media companies is coming from, is directly tied to exactly what we saw, that a player can manipulate these in an unethical way, and they are just aware of it by default. They know. And there was quotes where some players were like, well, yeah, I think it was, might have been Tatum. He's like, yeah, people yell at me about parlays. Like, I don't want them to lose money.
Yeah, totally. And
it's like, this is a huge issue with the game, and everyone's just pretending that it isn't.
Yeah, on one hand, I think of the Mad Men line, right? Like, Halliburton, you feel bad? Like, well, this is what the money's for. But Jontay Porter doesn't have that money. And to be honest, Halliburton should be making more money. Because as we're seeing, like, we always have to look up. And when Donald Sterling was disgraced and he had to sell the Clippers, I think he made $2 billion. The the board of directors, the 30-member board of directors of the NBA, let Mikhail Prokhorov in, a Russian arms dealer. He walked away after a few years with $2 billion. Then you're fucking Tyrese Halliburton being like, pay me more or I don't want to feel like shit. And, you say the 1919 White Sox, Black Sox, but like this has been part of our culture forever. The movie Field of Dreams is about gambling.
A parlay.
Yeah. Literally, the whole thing is about a parlay. And we think of it as like this wonderful father-daughter movie. But this was about, was a guy taking bribes or not? And
Kevin Costner in a cornfield wearing reflective sunglasses saying, "This is how I win."
that hot dog gets lodged in her throat and people were betting on the over-under of her coughing that up or not. But
I got 10 on the glizzy gobbler.
yeah. But this won't, I don't want to put my tin hat on, but like we won't really hear about this again for a while, because it does not benefit anybody. It does not benefit, everyone wants the suspension of disbelief except the players, and that's where the danger is.
You know, the idea that this is what they get paid for, I only view as sort of true, only because this is a new element. It's always been there in the background, but the NBA has really pushed it forwards in a way that they have normalized people screaming at players, whether it's on social media or on the sideline, at coaches, whatever it is, that they have said this is a legit part of the game. If they're going to sit there on, ESPN or NBA TV and talk about the spreads and talk about the parlays and advertise for this, then it's part of the game then. It's not this dark, seedy underbelly that we're on our phones gambling, but we just kind of keep that on the low. You've made it part of the experience of being an NBA fan, the same as, singing along to Jump Around during a jump ball or catching a t-shirt. This is all part of the action. And now me yelling at Tyrese Halliburton is simply the NBA experience. And he didn't get the big money for that because that wasn't part of the game in the same way that it is now. But I understand your major point here is that, well, you're wealthy and you're making a ton of money and you're a superstar, and that comes with this kind of scrutiny. But I think these guys are saying that this is a new kind of scrutiny that they aren't accustomed to, and it's not really even within the frame of basketball as a team sport and everything that they've learned about, because you're taught, you put up your numbers, you try to win the game, you're the coach, you're doing the best you can to win the game, and now someone's over here like, yeah, dumb bitch, put someone back in for their 9th rebound. And you're like, what? That's not anything to do with basketball.
Yeah, and this is, I think, the NBA would love for, sports in general would love for us to argue about who has the bigger dog, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. Kill ourselves over that because they don't want us to think about what we're watching, right? Which is like a highly malleable game. We were just talking about free throws. Now all these teams, all of a sudden the NBA's defense turned into 1990s like Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason shit. No, it's just like they can control this product in ways that we don't want to think about, but we understand. So they want us to think about ethics and not money.
Well, this idea that the game itself is sacred, but these gambling, apps are more profane and they're sort of separate from the game itself. The game exists in a vacuum and you're just betting on it. And as we saw with Jontay Porter, that's just not true whatsoever. And then you look at the guys who are on rookie contracts. Oh, you're on a 10-day deal and you're suddenly getting minutes late in the season? I mean, what's the temptation to double your money, triple your money, quadruple your money? A couple parlays that you can get off where you don't even necessarily have to help your team lose. You can just pass the ball a little bit more. You're getting 20 minutes a game, but you're only making $1 million this year and you're 26 years old. How can I turn this into $2 million? You can. You literally can if you get away with it. And then you imagine what that temptation is like for referees. They aren't making the same kind of money as the players, but they can directly control this. We want this, as you said, amount of foul shots per game. We're just not going to call foul shots. Amount of turnovers, travel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. That's a travel call. Sorry.
The Tim Donaghy story should have burned it all down, but it didn't. Some of the details are crazy. They're just like blatantly crooked. And I don't know. It's like, at some point, when do we accept that this is just naturally occurring? Like, I think about the cavemen back in the day being polyamorous, having cuddle parties in their caves, drawing stick figures of massive orgies, love for all. And when they figure out sports, when they're done glazing, there's like, well, what do we do now? It's just like, well, I bet you I can throw this rock farther than you can. The first thought after that is a third person being like, I bet you, my polyamorous partner, that you can't do that. And then it is just built into competition, right? It's like, my question is, the sooner we forget that betting is not intrinsically a part of sports, will be the sooner we have a better product.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has always been a part of it. I just mostly think that it's that even if it's fragile, the separation of church and state did have a benefit. And if we're going to say, okay, it's all connected, well, then you're going to have to really watch out for players like Jontay Porter or officials or people who don't have the same amount to lose that a LeBron James or Kevin Durant or someone with a max contract has. Because you do have the economic system of the NBA is that you have a huge disparity of wealth where guys are coming in on, minuscule contracts that are not guaranteed. And then you've got guys who are going to be making $70 million a year. And if there's going to be the presence of gambling in this context, they have to be extraordinarily vigilant because there are so many potential Jontay Porters out there.
Is the WWF and Harlem Globetrotters, are we looking at kind of like a fate like that, where it's like, okay, we admit like you can't trust this thing, but the performative aspect of it, the villains, the good guys, the dunks, the 3-pointers, like, is it going to be like kind of a wink to the fan base that like, we know, we know?
Right. I think it almost has to be at some point where you're saying, all right, this is not totally on the up and up, but if I'm operating from a position of ignorance, that's okay. The issue is that when you have your little independent operators, like a Jontay Porter, it throws the whole thing out of whack. Like, boxing works, and we know that it's crooked.
It kind of works. It doesn't
works a bit.
You know what does work?
Perfect pods.
Cookies.
Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.